But I am delighted to be here to welcome you to today's webinar, Trailblazer Tuesday with Tilly Chang. My name is Dr. Asha Weinstein Agrawal, and I'm the Education Director of the Mineta Transportation Institute at San Jose State University. MTI is a so-called University Transportation Center, and we lead 4 different multi-university competitively selected consortia that all collectively focus on improving the mobility of people and goods. And MTI's own mission is to increase mobility for all by improving safety, efficiency, accessibility, and the convenience of our nation's transportation system. And we accomplish this through a mix of surface transportation research, technology transfer, like today, education, and workforce development. Today's webinar is part of this Trailblazer Tuesday series, which MTI has organized to celebrate Women's History Month. And in this series, we're hearing insights from trailblazing women from academia, public and private industries, and the nonprofit sector. And I am so excited for today's webinar in the series featuring Tilly Chang. Tilly is the Executive Director of the San Francisco County Transportation Authority. She oversees the Transportation Authority's administration of San Francisco's half-cent transportation sales tax, as well as other voter-approved funding programs. Tilly also leads the agency's congestion management functions, and she has many roles external to the agency's leadership directly. She's the immediate past chair of the Self-Help Counties Coalition and serves on the boards of the Intelligent Transportation Society of America, UC Connect Advisory Committee, and Self-Help for the Elderly. Welcome, Tilly Chang.
Thank you so much, Asha. Thank you for having me, and to Director Philbrick and MTI for sponsoring this wonderful Women's History Month webinar series.
Well, I have been an admirer of yours from some decades now. I'm so delighted to be here with you today. So let me just jump right into my first question. You have nearly 2 decades of experience in the industry. So there must be moments when you reflect on how much you've learned and grown as a professional. Maybe even times you realize now that you would approach something differently if you were given a second chance. What would you tell young women who are just starting their careers in transportation? What are some things you would like them to know based on your own experience?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. Again, it's an honor to be here with you. And I've been an admirer of your work as well so much, Asha, through the years. And really, it's important to understand the stories of women who have come before us and great leaders who have served before us. And I think this is one of the first things I would suggest to young professionals, anybody coming up in our field, is really know your history. Try to learn about the examples that came before. There's so many important ones, and really follow your authentic self and your passion as you do so. Really be guided by your own light inside. Trust yourself, and really pursue that interest. And do so unapologetically, really, wherever it takes you. It's important to learn both formally, if you can, and informally. You may not always have the resources or the time to pursue a formal background in our field. And what's wonderful about our field is that you can come to it from so many different paths. There's not just one way. There are many different paths. Be open to the universe, your community. We'll talk perhaps a little bit more about that. Be proactive. You have it in you, and believe in yourself. Believe in yourself and self-advocate as needed throughout your journey. As the great Shirley Chisholm said previously, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring your own folding chair. I love that quote. I just stole that from Bevan Dufty, director of the BART board. So he says that a lot. But I think those are some of the tips that I would have in general, in terms of self-advocacy. Take your space, but then make space. Make space for others, lift yourself up, but also lift up others as you do so, and certainly as part of creating that legacy of leadership. So I think that those are some of the tips that I think have served me and that my mentors have taught me as well.
And actually, if I could just, I'd be love to hear how you got into transportation in the first place? What drew
Great.
you to our industry?
Well, guess what? I grew up in San Jose. What a great place to grow up. And what inspired me was really seeing my city in action. I was a young babysitter for my neighbors when we petitioned the city council for a park near my house.
Mhm.
And council member Jim Bell helped us get that approved. Of course, through the years, I was so privileged later to work with Senator Jim Bell when he was a co-author of SB1, our landmark transportation funding program in California. But it was just the first taste of what is it like to, what is this business of being in cities and city building. I was also so inspired to visit Congressman Norman Mineta when he was serving at that time in Congress, representing San Jose, and he's, of course, had formerly been the first API mayor of San Jose and was a great leader, eventually serving as our transportation secretary under the Bush administration, Bush 2. So growing up, I had great examples of leadership, and particularly API leadership, which was inspiring to me as a young person. And also just kind of getting around wasn't terribly easy down there, but my bike and the bus were freedom. And I was noticing how much I enjoyed it, and just kind of, I think that inspired me eventually when I went to college to study city planning. And I got to meet amazing professors there, Betty Deacon, and a whole host of folks in city planning and in transportation and civil engineering, which sort of then led me to my first internship at the SCCTA, which was back then what VTA was called, the Valley Transportation Authority now. And I worked in the light rail division, of course, which was already underway with some of the great work inspired by Rod Diridan.
Great. Well, thank you. So let's turn now to a question about place.
Mhm.
So you have developed your career, particularly in San Francisco, which has a legacy as a very progressive and equity focused city. How do you think that having worked in San Francisco has influenced the way you approach leadership and empowering future leaders?
What a great question. Thanks for that. I feel like every day is a privilege to come to work in the city. It's kind of a planner's nirvana. And I feel so fortunate to work with the team we have here at the SFCTA. And you're right, San Francisco has been a pioneer of progressive leadership from the earliest days. We had Maya Angelou, who started out as a conductor on the Market Street Railway. We had our own Curtis Green, who was the former GM of then SF Municipal Railway, a predecessor to Muni, and he was the first Black general manager of a major transit system in the United States. And so this legacy is quite tremendous here. And now we've, of course, got the leadership of Jeff Tumlin and Julie Kirschbaum as director of transit, my friends and colleagues over at SFMTA. And we all served at the pleasure of the people of San Francisco, who continually support policies that are sustainable, that focus on transit first. That is our North Star here in San Francisco. And they are quite demanding of high quality and good infrastructure and good transit and good, safe, walkable communities. And it's a pleasure and a privilege to work on these issues. And of course, our leadership, has been tremendous as well. Everyone from the former mayor and Senator Dianne Feinstein and Vice President Senator Kamala Harris, as well as our own amazing speaker, Emerita Nancy Pelosi, herself a tremendous champion of transit and infrastructure with her leadership on the historic bipartisan infrastructure bill.
Okay, well, one of the things you mentioned a moment ago was kind of the policy priorities, like what do people want to see happening in transportation in San Francisco? So let me move to a question where, we know that women tend to ride transit more than men, and at the same time, women and girls often face more sort of concerning safety issues when using public transportation.
Mhm.
You tried to use your leadership and your sort of broader influence in the industry to make positive changes when it comes to improving transit safety, which, while it may help women and girls more, obviously helps everybody travel safely in our community.
Absolutely. So thanks for that question. And it's very timely and topical, of course, now where we're trying so hard, our colleagues in transit and throughout the city, to welcome riders back to public transit, to our city, and as far as tourism and business travel. We're seeing small signs of recovery, steady and slow but steady recovery, and the efforts are very laser focused on this topic. We know that it's important to understand the research that's been done on travel. Women do take more trips. They take more transit trips in particular. They're responsible for more non-work trips, which happen throughout the day. And here we do see some peaking of that, but it is throughout the day. So it's really important as Muni and Caltrain and BART and other services are trying to reorient and reflect the needs of essential workers and the new work from home travel patterns for those who have that option. But not everyone does have that option. And we're seeing that play out. Muni is the #1 provider of trips for low-income travelers, and more so than all the other Bay Area operators combined. And so a clean and safe system is absolutely the top priority, I would say, that I'm hearing from my colleagues, Bob Powers, Jeff Tomlin, and the like, and Michelle Bouchard, who's leading Caltrain, into the new era from a 150-year-old diesel system to an electrified system. It's really wonderful, and they're working together so that the connections are as smooth as possible between them, whether it's wayfinding, whether it's through the fare system. Affordable fares are also important so that everyone can access services through, for example, the new pilot of a Bay Pass in the Bay Area that's led by the MTC, Metropolitan Transportation Commission, very much sponsored by Seamless Transit, another organization in the Bay Area working toward connectivity. So clean and safe is certainly the mantra. A good user experience, a strong basis for recovery is the focus of our city. And to serve that city and the diversity of our city, we find it really important to reflect that diversity, that we want folks at our agency to have connections in the community, to reflect that community. And so we've made, concerted efforts to try and reflect that more and be more inclusive over the years. So I'm proud to say that, we're on our way. We're not 100% there yet, but we've made tremendous progress. And, in this Women's History Month, I just want to celebrate that for all organizations who are doing so throughout the city, really striving and in the region to reflect the region's population and community.
I want to ask you a follow-up question in a moment, but let me also just remind our audience that we welcome your questions. So if you have any that you might like to have Tilly answer, please put them into the Q&A. I may not be able to answer everything, but we love getting some audience involvement. But just a moment ago, you mentioned the importance of increasing the diversity of the people who lead our transportation agencies. And as I think probably most people on the call are aware, senior managers and executives in transportation tend to be disproportionately male. What advice do you offer young women, including those from underrepresented groups, who are looking to rise in their organizations? Do you have, and you've already mentioned a few tips for success earlier, but do you have any others that you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been very proud at the agency to have undergone an in-depth process within our agency to try and lift up these practices and to increase our diversity of our own management and our staff. And after years of working on this, we are now composed, I'm proud to say, of 62% of management who identify as female, and about 55, over a majority of our staff who identify as female. And about 50% of our management are persons of color, 58% of all staff are persons of color. This happens through intentionality that begins, as you say, with each individual, and it certainly becomes a process of self-reflection as we participate then as an organization, as an agency, and lead ourselves through that process. And it should be quite intentional. So I think we're all making progress. I know we're part of a region that is also making progress, but there's still some way to go. I just want to mention that I so much appreciate our Bay Area chapter of Women's Transportation Seminar and their continuing research through the years through the Glass Ceiling Report, the latest version of which came out November 23. which do say it does indicate that we are making some progress, but there's, again, quite a ways to go with 20 to 29% of women in managerial positions. It's not nearly enough, but that has come up from the 10 to 15% range as it was back about a decade ago. So as far as advice to women or young people coming up, I think certainly what I said earlier, not only, get out there and pursue your passion and try and get involved in whatever types of activities that are being offered in your community through professional organizations and think tanks and classes and informal networking through your friends group or professional organizations, but really be prepared. And what do I mean by being prepared? It really seems like the more research you do, the more understanding that you have on a topic, it's really going to pay off when you have that chance encounter with somebody, say, in line at a conference or at a talk, at Spur, which is our local think tank. They say that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And I really do believe that. I think you can make your own luck too. And it doesn't take a lot of resources. It just kind of takes effort. It takes, getting out there and pushing yourself to go to that, go to that event, go to that happy hour. It may not even be a work happy hour, but you never know. Think something could happen, and you could find out that you do have something in common with somebody who's working in our industry. So it does, I think it takes that sort of motivation, and it's not everyone's natural instinct to be, extroverted or to go out and meet and network, but it really does seem it seemed to be something that can pay off over time. And I'm struck by somebody said this earlier at a WTS event, that there's no growth in comfort, right? So I think there's some growth in comfort. We can't always be out there, but when you can stretch yourself, it can really pay off. And again, that means going out and perhaps trying a new class or trying a new assignment even at your work and asking for that assignment. So maybe that's something that is something that would push your boundaries a bit. And it's something that I feel like it would be helpful to just challenge yourself a little. Minda Hart, by the way, is an author I like to recommend to folks who are interested in reading about some of these strategies. And she wrote a book called The Memo. I don't know if you've read it. It's sort of like the lean in for women of color. I find it's kind of useful for anyone coming up in our industry to just kind of understand, what are the dynamics out there and what are some of the things that you can do and take that initiative, as well as grow your own resource and sort of network to support you as you go through this journey. It's not always easy, not everyone has access to a great network, but I do think that it can be learned. It can be, people are very generous with their time. And so if you reach out to folks, now there's tools like LinkedIn and any number of other resources. And I think folks should not be shy about trying to reach out to folks and seek any kinds of support or, an informal coffee advice. Again, everyone in our industry, I find, is very generous and very interested in supporting the next generation of leaders.
And I don't know, you mentioned it earlier, some people who are inspirational to you. Do you have any anecdotes you could share about maybe somebody who gave you a particular piece of advice that was especially useful, or somebody whose sort of activities you were able to directly model that helped you advance your career?
Oh gosh. Oh, my mind flashes back to my days at MTC, and I was just a young baby planner back then in the 90s, and the Bay Area Partnership was being born. This is now all the different leaders of the transit agencies and the transportation authorities around the Bay. And by now, I'm so proud to say, I think, 5 out of 8 of us, or 9 of us in the Bay Area, are led by women at the county level, at transportation agency level, including Santa Clara with Carolyn Gonat and others in the Bay Area. But, back then, I did study leadership through that limited experience I had at MTC as they were creating this organization. And I noticed Brigid Hines-Charon. She was the first executive director of our agency here in San Francisco. And she was interacting with Sharon Banks, the great Sharon Banks, who was leading AC Transit at the time. And you had Therese McMillan and Ann Flemmer, as deputy executive directors of MTC, working with Larry Doms and Bill Hine. Anyway, just tremendous women and men, who support women and who supported that leadership, and seeing them interact, them negotiate, them kind of debate, and finally, to be coalition builders in the region to create the first ever institution of the Bay Area Partnership, so that we could really act as a region and speak with one voice and create the advocacy so that the Bay Area could go and get and fight for, infrastructure dollars or transit dollars or whatever it was, as a cohesive whole. I thought that was a tremendous opportunity, and I've been always forever grateful for a lot of those relationships that were lasting.
Well, thank you. And another question, and you mentioned it a few minutes ago, how proud you are that, rightly so, that your organization has a large percentage of female identifying people in leadership roles. I have sort of a two-part question. One, can you share with us some specific things that your agency has done to try to advance the careers of women? And then also, I realize we're in the Bay Area, and a lot of the country is in a very different kind of political climate and social understanding about diversity. As you tell us about things you and your agency have done, maybe you can reflect on whether you think these would work anywhere right now, or how some of them might
Oh,
need sort of
sure.
tailored or shaped in other parts of the country.
Gosh, my advice is with each organization to spend the time, right? Invest the time with the people in your organization, especially, your management team, to really think and to be thoughtful about this question. How do we become a workplace of choice? Workplace excellence has been an initiative for a few years at our agency, and it was born of some conflict. There was born of we're out of balance in terms of our work-life balance. We're not getting enough, advancement opportunities. Some folks felt, and there was turnover and there was some friction. And I think that, it's sometimes uncomfortable, right? But it's important to prioritize these questions and to try and get to some of the root causes, which is not always going to be a fast process, to understand how to communicate, to establish a common understanding and background around, for example, racial equity. We underwent the GARE program, the Government Alliance of on Racial Equity. We were the second cohort in San Francisco to do so, and that took some time, but we all went through it so that we all had a common understanding, background, history, vocabulary, and then we could become more intentional and thoughtful about how we wanted to apply that in our own agency. Everything from the HR process, how we recruit, where we recruit, how early do we go to the schools and the community colleges and all the professional organizations. What do we require as minimum qualifications, and really reviewing that and taking down some of those, educational requirements and credentials and substituting that, with work experience and other pathways into our agency. Being kind of name blind and anonymizing resumes and schools and universities or wherever that was that you got your credential, we were intentional about taking those out of the initial round and creating this sort of more anonymized process so that we could increase the equity of the process itself, and to bring in talent wherever it resides, regardless of any kind of unintended bias that naturally will come in. We're all human. So trying to apply these concepts was a group exercise as well, not just through HR and recruitment. It happened through procurement. It happens through our funding programs that are led by Anna Lafort and our standing up of our new transportation sales tax measure, Prop L. It was infused from the very beginning then to bring in some principles, around equity, and to bring the staff into that, to co-create that, right, with our staff. Like, how are we gonna create this expenditure plan, and how are we gonna recruit from all sectors? How are we gonna involve everyone and then apply equity principles to the funding decisions, including transparency and accountability and performance, data-driven performance. So some of these lessons, I think, are just part of your values in any organization. Part of it is management and leadership and how you bring people into that conversation, but also then cut it off because people can get quite involved, and so you do need to eventually come to a decision and apply that, and then review it. Is it working? Is it not working? And be honest about that. So we're continually trying to do that, and trying, I think, to improve. It's not, you're never done, but I think it's been serving us fairly well in that we've been so fortunate to attract and retain a great team, and hopefully we'll continue that trend.
So we're drawing near the end of this webinar. So I'm going to just ask two quick questions. One of our audience members pointed out that there's a lot of sort of interest in advanced technologies in transportation,
Yes.
whether that's ITS or like batteries or AI. How do you think this sort of technological focus, how should women who want to rise in that sort of industry think about that? And is this going to be a barrier, or are there obvious sort of ways around that potential barrier?
It's just the next thing. There's always innovation. We've had innovation in BRT. We've had innovation in project delivery with the first P3 on the state highway network with our Presidio Parkway. We've seen innovation in, obviously, transportation and mobility options, from car share to bike share to stand-up scooters and sit-down scooters, and who knows, it'll be flying jetpacks. Certainly TNCs and AVs, there is an angle for gender in that not just women, but many people, have been concerned about, again, safety and security in public transportation and efficiency, right? Or the inability to get a taxi. So yes, when Ride Hail came to San Francisco, we had to be ready. And we draw from folks, not necessarily who came from a background, because there was quite a new thing, but really people who could apply their knowledge and their expertise in this new area with us as we're trying to create good research and being led by data, and then providing good advice to the board and our community. My hope is that these applications will boost transit and the shared modes, both public and private. We can't do it all through public, but we'd like to make sure that choices in public transportation are excellent. We just finished a pilot on Treasure Island of the first autonomous shuttle that we've piloted in San Francisco, and I know that they've been deployed elsewhere around the country. As we're figuring out how to manage and work with the private passenger service AVs that are now, Waymo is operating and deploying in San Francisco. And it's really an amazing time, to be in transportation. So I would say, learn from whatever resources you can get publicly, and don't hesitate to reach out if you're interested in this area, and seek advice, from how to get more involved, on how to get more involved, rather.
Okay, and I like your point about, yes, we can think of these as sort of tech focused, but it's also just the next new thing, and there will always be a new thing that none of us know much about.
Yeah, and that's okay.
That's okay. So just to close out, Women's History Month is a prime time to discuss women's empowerment, but hopefully that goes on all year. What are some things, or even just one thing, that you think we can do to uplift each other every day, even when we're not officially in Women's History Month?
Oh, goodness. Well, I think just as professionals in this field, having compassion, for others and for yourself. We can't do it all. No one can. And it's okay. It's okay to strive and to feel like, it is the journey and not the destination. And so I hope that as each of us pursues our individual journeys and paths, that we have grace for ourselves and for others, and that we continue to be inspired by one another by sharing our stories and hearing one another's stories, asking questions, being curious, and also being generous with your time, with, again, others in the industry, with, the next generation of young folks coming up, because we need them. We need them in our transportation sector. We've got to improve on our numbers, especially as women. I think our time has been, we've accelerated our progress, but really, as I said earlier, and we know the data, there's a long way to go. So I feel like we just need to continue to support each other and keep pressing forward.
Well, thank you. I'm going to remember in particular having compassion, telling our stories, and also listening to other people's stories. Among the other things you said, those really stand out for me. Well, I fear that our time has come to an end, so I'd like to thank our guest, Tilly Chang, so much for joining us to share your insights as a transportation trailblazer, a woman in the industry who is a very influential leader. And we're really grateful that you took time to be with us today. I know you, in fact, had to run right over from a
Okay.
board meeting.
Thank
And
you.
I'd also like to thank everyone in the audience who has joined us. We hope you enjoyed this discussion in celebration of Women's History Month. The webinar is recorded, and everyone who registered will be getting a link if you want to rewatch it or share it with friends. And then lastly, I'll just note that we have another one of these Trailblazer Tuesdays webinars coming up next week, and our featured guest is Jeanette Walker-Ford. She is the Senior Vice President and Principal Director at WSP and also the current chair of WTS International. And I believe there's some information in the chat about how you can get yourself signed up to hopefully join us for that conversation as well.
Thank you, Asha.
So
It's been an honor. Thank you so much.
thank you so much, Tilly. And again, thank you to the audience. Let's all go out, listen to other people's stories, tell our own, have compassion, and help advance diversity of all types in our industry. Thank you.